Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Pam. I'm the Corridor Planning Project Manager, and I'll be the presenter this evening. The City of Saskatoon respectfully acknowledges that we are located and gathered here this evening on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. As part of our roles in planning for the future of these lands, we will strive to plan for and move together toward outcomes that have positive effects in the lives of First Nations, Métis, and all Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, both current residents of this place and future newcomers and generations to come. To ensure the event runs smoothly, our moderators this evening will be Patrick, Lee, Ty, and Thomas. I will be going through the program and land use changes, followed with a Q&A period. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to post it in the chat and a moderator will try and answer it. Some responses may wait until the Q&A period. The goal of the Corridor Planning Program is to transform arterial or major streets in the corridor growth area, as shown in this map, into pedestrian-focused places that integrate homes near services, shops, and employment areas. The goal of the growth area is to accommodate 15% of new development. Along many of these major roads, residential is currently not allowed, so this is a significant change. And this change to add more residential will support our planned bus rapid transit system, and it'll allow for more options to live near established commercial areas. Implementation of these changes was to be completed through a corridor plan for each of the plan areas as shown in this map. In May 2023, Saskatoon City Council approved the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan, and one of the initiatives was to support new residential development close to rapid transit. This aligns with the goals of the Corridor Planning Program. It did change our work plan a little bit, but as our intent was to do one plan area or corridor plan at a time. So we got to work, and through September to November, we met with the community in 6 of the plan areas to ask for feedback on proposed land use maps that applied corridor land uses. This was setting up the rezoning process, and the next step was to offer a city-led rezoning for any interested landowners. To support the city's Housing Accelerator Fund application, the action plan was amended at the end of November to allow up to 4 stories within 800 meters from the planned bus rapid transit system. The 800-meter buffer from planned rapid transit, as shown in this map, has been redefined. And now we call it the transit development area, as shown in this map. So the growth area has increased from roughly 250 meters to 800 meters. And the maximum building height for multiple unit dwellings has generally increased within the neighborhood from 3 to 4 stories. We will still have the corridor growth area, and we will still continue to do corridor plans. In some cases, the increase to 4 stories will not make a difference, and that you'll see in this map. The teal color shows where 4 stories or above is already allowed. The orange shows where multiple unit dwellings, they're currently allowed, but they're just not 4 stories. So the amendment to allow 4 stories within the transit development area, again, that's this area, this purple, or not purple, sorry, the more burgundy outline. So the amendment to allow 4 stories within this area, the transit development area, will be going to council for approval in June, along with land use changes that I will be going over shortly. I know that there are lots of people eagerly waiting to learn more about what they can build or what can be built next to them, and we just aren't really sure all the details yet. We're still working on them. But as soon as the amendment has been drafted, I will be posting the information to the Housing Accelerator Fund Engage page. So this is where it will be posted. Back in the fall, this was the timeline we shared. So now we've updated it a bit. This event that we're having tonight, this would be considered the land use engagement number 2. And over the next 2 months, we will send out notifications to properties with a proposed land use designation of station mixed use, and we'll host an event to share information about opting in to rezone as corridor station mixed use 1. Previously, the option to opt in was open to all property owners, but with the amendment to allow 4-story residential everywhere within the transit development area, it pretty much makes that rezoning irrelevant. All of the changes to the zoning bylaw and to the official community plan will be presented at the Municipal Planning Commission in May, followed by a public hearing in June. This includes the land use maps, permitting 4-story multiple unit dwellings within that transit development area, modifications to the corridor growth area boundary. Also, we are considering other amendments to allow for an increase to the maximum building height for corridor mixed use 1 and the corridor residential zoning district. The approval for opt-in rezoning will occur at the July public hearing. So now I'm going to go over the land use maps. These maps are available on our website you can see the link on the screen. So I'm going to show you the land use maps that we shared with you in the fall, and then I'm going to highlight the areas where we're changing and then show you the new land use map. So we'll begin with the 22nd Street plan area and then travel east. So this is the map that we shared in fall. These are the areas of change. And then these are the highlighted areas of change. And this is the updated map. So if you'll just notice right here, this has been removed to, it was station mixed use, and now it's being identified as part of the downtown district plan. So it has been removed, that designation. And then right here, we've changed these to corridor mixed use, to corridor residential is the significant part of the change, and then community facilities. Next, we'll be moving on to Woodlawn plan area. This is what we had showed you in the fall. These are the areas of change. And this is the updated map. So the majority of the change, again, is corridor residential, and then some community facilities. And next, we've got Nutana. This is what we showed you. These are the areas of change. And this is the updated land use map. So we'll start off with high density residential right here. And then we added 1 property for station mixed use. Corridor residential, or sorry, corridor mixed use. And then we extended corridor Main Street for these 2. And then again, the majority is corridor residential. This is the 8th Street plan area that we shared. These are the areas of change. And you will notice that there are some boundary extensions here. And all of the changes in this plan area are corridor residential. Okay, and we're moving on to the Preston plan area. Please note that we've changed direction here. So this is the north arrow. This would be Preston running down here, just to help get you your orientation. So these are the areas of change. This is the updated map. First, we've got institutional, which is up here. Then we've got corridor mixed use, corridor residential, community facility, and community or utility, sorry. Our next area is the college plan area. So these areas identified in red are the areas of change. And this is the updated map showing corridor residential. Okay, thank you everyone for listening to the presentation. We can move on to the question and answer period. So again, if you have a question, you just can post it in the chat And if you like somebody else's question, feel free to like it, and then the moderators will know that that's a higher priority question.
Hey, Pam. So our first question is, so all properties in Varsity View can now be used to build 4-story multi-unit housing? So if you wouldn't address that question.
Sure, thank you. So it won't necessarily be every single property. We're still working out the details, but if something is, it is likely that we're looking at anything that is commercial, that is solely commercial, that won't have residential in it. But I think what your question is more or less directed at is more the residential zoning districts, and will it allow everywhere within those zoning districts? And that is the case. That is the intent of that amendment. But areas like industrial areas, just in general, or park space, those ones will not allow for.
Okay, Pam. So we have the next question, which is, so corridor residential zoning will allow 4-story multi-unit buildings? That's a question.
Yes, that's correct. It will.
Perfect. And then on to the next question. Can I get the updated plans from the city? Is there a designated email I can send my request?
Sure. That is on the screen right now. So quarterplans@saskatoon.ca.
There's another question here asking about the timeline for these changes.
Oh,
and
sure.
Which areas to be developed first?
So the whole transit development area, everything will be approved all at once. And that will be going before council in June. And then the opt-in for rezoning for station mixed use, that will go before council for approval in July. But it won't be like how we identified it previously, where it was one plan area at a time. Everything is being done all at once.
There's another question here just asking if this information session will be available online. Yes, it's recorded and will be available.
Yeah, everything will be posted online. On that Engage page at the bottom is the link of my screen that I'm sharing. So I'll just go over this. I can see that someone had asked about the boundaries overall expanded from the previous map. So the rationale for extending corridor residential to the whole area is because that the zoning district that is tied to corridor residential, it basically allows it now with the 4 stories. So we're just following the direction from the 4 stories and applying it everywhere.
Okay, there's another question here, Pam, for you. What is the timeline for the changes? Which area is to be developed first?
Okay, so which areas will be developed first will depend on the property owner. We're not developing anything. We're just enabling it to happen, assuming that council approves it. So I would say that if someone put in say got approved in June, it would, I don't know, probably take a year. So I see that there's a question, is there any opportunity to comment or object to the rezoning? Is this a done deal? You do have the opportunity to comment at council. So that will be, it goes to public hearing in June, like I said, and you can respond then. So this is tied to the Housing Accelerator Fund initiative. And if the city does not approve it, it is likely that they do not get funding. And the funding that we were approved for was $41 million.
Okay, I'm not sure if this has been asked already, Pam. So we could do a redevelopment in our residential area within the next year. I think that's the question.
Assuming that it does get approved, then yes, you would be able to. And then also there is that option to opt in for the rezoning for station mixed use as well, and that would be for July, but that's just for station mixed use properties.
Okay. The next question is, will there be a limit of the units per lots depending on size?
Well, there will be constraints based on the site setbacks, so that would be the front setbacks and the side, and then there's obviously the height of 4 stories. So how many units you can fit in that building envelope would be what you would have to deal with. And it's, you know, it's largely on the size of lot, but we're not going to regulate and say that it's up to this many units.
Pam, I saw a couple of questions about the Housing Accelerator Fund itself. One question alluded to how will the fund be used? What does it pay for? And another question kind of related to that, I think, is why is such an enormous change happening so fast and all at once?
Okay, those are all very good questions. So the Housing Accelerator Fund, I can share that link. There's more information on the Housing Accelerator Fund website, but the funding, I don't think any announcements have been made on what the funding will be used for. That still has to go to council for approval. It was just approved today, or was that yesterday? And so it is likely that it'll be used to go towards affordable housing initiatives. And sorry, what were the other questions, Lee?
The other question was, why are there such these enormous changes happening so fast and all at once?
Yeah, so again, it's all tied to the Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives that they want to see so many units being developed within 2 years. The city's not leading this. This is not our typical process. It is very fast, and I do understand that it's a big change so quickly. But it's
Pam?
something, yeah.
Sorry to intrude. My name is Chris Schultz. I'm with the Planning and Development Department here, and I thought I would just jump in with maybe a general response in regards to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So the federal government, as Pam noted, is working with municipalities across the country to essentially targeting two main concepts, encouraging what they call missing middle housing, which is everything from between single family and two unit dwellings up to mid-rise apartment buildings, as well as what they call ending exclusionary zoning, which essentially limits development to 1 and 2 unit dwellings in neighborhoods. So what we've been seeing, and indeed what Saskatoon's Housing Accelerator Fund application included, was initiatives to remove exclusionary zoning within the city across the board and enable missing middle housing within that 800 meters of the proposed bus rapid transit routes. And so, as Pam has noted, it's the sort of confluence of the Housing Accelerator Fund and the corridor zoning discussion and land use discussion that is sort of getting crossed up here. And what we have is the Housing Accelerator Fund our commitments under that are what is bringing about the 4-story development within 800 meters of the proposed bus rapid transit.
All right, thanks, Chris, for that. I think we've got a follow-up question here still on zoning. Question 1: once the zoning changes take place, can we only apply for permits to redevelop, or is the city already accepting requests based on proposed zone changes? And then question 2 is, what is the minimum lot requirement or width requirement for a residential lot to develop into a 4-story unit dwelling?
So we do not have the development standards developed yet. We're working on it, but if you look at what is typical in our zoning bylaw and what we see for other sites, it is likely that it would be a 50-foot lot would allow for the 4 stories and not less than that. So that would be typically what you see. And we are trying to follow the corridor zoning districts that have already been established for the standards that we are developing. So you can kind of look to those to see what you can expect. And it shouldn't be that much longer before we have something drafted up. It's just went through multiple different scenarios, and it's taken a long time to come up with how we're going to affect this many different zoning districts and allow such a big change.
All right, thanks, Pam, for that. The next question is, it's shocking about the Varsity View being rezoned in that way. How can opposing views be made clear to whoever will be voting on this?
So it would be council that will need to vote on it. So it is a big change, but in Varsity View, or in any neighborhood, there's buildings that are already there. So in order for this development to occur, things need to be torn down, and you really need to consider the property value and what the return on investment would be. And I know this isn't comforting information for you to hear, but there's lots of factors that go in. It's just not just because something is rezoned is development gonna occur tomorrow. It's going to be a long long process for this change to occur. And with this transit development area expanding into a larger area, it is probably more likely that we won't see a cluster of development occur just within our corridor growth area, that this will be expanded out and you'll see it more spread out throughout the city rather than clustering in the neighborhoods. So.
Pam, there was a couple questions that are related about parking. One was, will parking requirements be reduced? And the other one was there any consideration for parking capacity in the residential neighborhoods?
So the parking requirements for the whole entire city are being reviewed right now, and there will be some sort of amendment going to council this year that will seek approval for removing parking requirements. So that is still developing, and it will go to council for approval sometime this year. And that's really all the information that I have about that right now.
And there's one question about the character of neighborhoods. It says, so this is just being applied everywhere despite any historic character in Saskatoon's neighborhoods. And maybe you can speak to the character piece that came out of City Council.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to sorry, what was the question again there, Lee?
So this is just being applied everywhere despite any historic character in Saskatoon's neighborhoods. And I know that there is an initiative or a report that Patrick is working on that relates to neighborhood character.
Yeah, so the neighborhood character piece, we are allowing this despite the character of the neighborhood. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it, to be honest. If Patrick wants to speak to that, he can.
Sure. Hi, my name is Patrick Lowe. I am on the corridor team, and yes, there was a motion from City Council to about how the changes brought about by the Housing Accelerator Fund might impact neighborhood character, and there is a report that I can share with whoever asked the question. If you would like to send an email to corridorplans@saskatoon.ca, I can share the report that was written in response to that. Generally speaking, it would, in established neighborhoods, we have the neighborhood infill regulations. Those will be looked at over the course of this year and next year to see how, amongst other considerations, including character and also our need to increase housing supply, how those all fit together. Hope that answers your question, and please send an email to corridorplans@saskatoon.ca. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Pam, we've got more zoning questions. How has the response been to the corridor zoning changes with the affected owners? And then there's another one on if the rezoning will affect the value of your property negatively. Like, will there be a reassessment, for instance?
So the reassessments will happen as they normally do, and there's no indication that this is going to negatively impact a particular property, but we'll see as time goes. Yeah, I have contacted assessors, and they're not saying just because you're in a transit development area, your property value is going down. if anything, it allows more ability for development. So your properties could, I don't know. What was that second question?
Just about if the rezoning affects the value of your property negatively, and will there be a reassessment?
Oh, if it,
If
yeah, like I said, properties will be reassessed that's standard, and that process will still occur.
I don't know if this helps, but this process won't trigger a new reassessment outside of the normal process of when properties get reassessed. I don't know if that kind of helps that question.
And then there's a follow-up question on what exactly will the city be able to do with the $41 million? What is the purpose?
So the purpose is to incentivize housing, or to, like Chris had said, that missing middle piece is to encourage that missing middle. More information can be found on the Housing Accelerator Fund website for what the whole project is all about and what the money will be used for.
So I will just add, this is Chris Schultz again. I'll just add that there's a report going forward to, I believe it's the upcoming Finance Committee here in March, that will outline the city's intended approach to allocating the 41 million across a variety of initiatives. Main focus of the funding allocations is intended to be incentives, particularly for affordable housing, but looking at also supporting market housing as well. Other uses for the funds include potential use of city-owned property for development catalyst sites, partnership with city facilities potentially. For instance, we're looking at the potential for co-locating housing with things like fire halls, as well. The work of implementing the changes in regulations and administering what we anticipate might be additional development activity across the city will be supported by these funds. But as I mentioned, more details will be available when that report's public in for the February Standing Policy Committee on Finance, or excuse me, March Finance Committee.
Thanks, Chris.
Another question about why not put this on pause until after the civic election?
Oh, because we've got the Housing Accelerator Fund has commitments that we have to meet by certain deadlines, and they were all very quick. So when we first had our application in May, we were told that the funding would be approved in July and we would have 2 years from July. The approval wasn't until this week. And so we have 2 years to do all this work, and it just takes a long time to get the approvals in and to start it off. So in order to capture the most housing with the improvements, we need to do it right away.
And then there's a question just on the Housing Accelerator Fund. Does the HAF also include carriage house on existing single-family homes?
So Lee, would you like to speak to this one?
Sure, I actually just answered that question in text as well in the chat itself. But yes, some zoning amendments are being brought forward to City Council in April, which will enable some greater uptake of that form of development we call them accessory dwelling units, which includes garden suites or carriage homes, garage suites, and secondary suites. It's not really related to corridor planning, but it is related to the Housing Accelerator Fund. More information on that can be found on the Engage page at saskatoon.ca/HAF.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So yeah, next question is why not increase the density at the ends of this new bus lines where people will use buses instead of increasing it in this blanket way without regard to some of our historic core areas?
So
What do you-
we're allowing it to occur within the whole transit development area, which does include the suburban areas, but it's only along where planned bus rapid transit is. And since the lines end and they don't extend quite into Brighton yet because, well, there's no one living there for one, it kind of cuts off. I can go back to one of the maps. I think that might be useful. I'll just stop sharing and I can bring up the map again. Bear with me here a second. Okay. Okay, so as you can see right here, like this transit development area, you're right, it does not extend past Brighton. There's also no homes here. We do not have the planned routing yet here for the transit system. So right now it's a loop around that's right here. So, or maybe it's a little bit closer over here. Anyway, so we stuck with that and when it said planned bus rapid transit, we went with where the approved routing is. And then this buffer of 800 meters was used. And then to create this line work, we used arterial roadways. We tried not to split up a block face. So we kind of maneuvered around that. And in some areas, we extended a little bit farther where there's maybe some federal agricultural lands or some other agricultural lands. And then areas like over here where it's industrial, it goes a lot tighter into the corridor growth area because we're not going to see residential development being built over here. Yeah, is there any questions, any further questions about that?
I'll maybe just jump in, Pam, because I think the question was partly about the boundary, but also partly about the focus on infill rather than growth at the sort of at the edges of the system. And I can speak to that. Chris Schultz here again. Basically, the city has been working on its growth plan now for about a little over 12 years, and that plan for growth has been all about balancing our growth between greenfield and infill areas with a focus of infill being along high frequency transit corridors. That's to take advantage of existing roads and infrastructure and parks and schools that we already have in these places to help ensure that existing communities as they age remain viable and are also supportive of our investments in transit infrastructure. So you know, we certainly aren't forgetting about growth at the ends of the system and certainly hope that folks that choose to live in the new areas of the city will use the bus rapid transit system. But this is also about building in the density to make sure that transit is supportive or transit is supported by high ridership across the system and not just from the ends. I will also add, I guess, that it was a requirement of the Housing Accelerator Fund initiative that this intensification be tied to our transit system. So really, in some ways, the Housing Accelerator Fund is aligned with our long-standing policy, albeit they're asking us to move much more quickly and over a broader area.
Pam, there's one question here. it feels like this is a done deal, and there's no chance for the public to say no to this completely indiscriminate 800-meter area. Is there no room for negotiation? Maybe before you answer, I'll just add in that the Housing Accelerator Fund is a nationwide program. Saskatoon is not unique in a lot of these changes that are happening. In many ways, we're kind of following suit from a lot of larger cities. I don't know if we can say anything is a done deal, but so that's kind of a tough question to give a concrete answer for. I don't know if you can add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a tough question. So nothing is a done deal. It still needs approval by council. But at the same time, the money is, it's hinging on that we do approve these amendments. So, and you're probably wondering about the negotiating of the 800 meters. We definitely tried to reduce that and said we've got a corridor growth area, we've got these plans, and it really didn't matter. It was like Ty said, it's nationwide, and everybody has almost everybody has these same kind of requirements.
Thanks, Pam. And then there's just a quick follow-up question on the source of funds. Again, what are the source of funds for the necessary infrastructure upgrades, especially in the metro neighborhoods, water, sewer, roadway improvements, etc.?
Sure. So within the corridor growth area, we have already been looking at what areas would need to be an increase in infrastructure to support the density. So we do have a funding mechanism to partially support that over time. We have not looked at the transit development area. We have definitely had meetings saying like these changes are going to occur, but one thing within the permissions, the approval in the zoning bylaw, it will have stipulations saying that approvals are subject to the capacity being there for the infrastructure. So if the pipes can't accommodate the project, then it won't get approved.
Okay, Pam, thanks for that. And then there's, I think we missed this one. It's about, again, more on rezoning. Have you considered the public may not have the approved, it says might not have approved this bus rapid transit routes if we, I think you already answered to that one, the 800-meter rezoning scheme. Yeah, just gonna.
Maybe the question, sorry, I can't see it.
I'll just read it again, Pam.
Okay.
It feels like this is a done deal. And
Oh.
There's no chance for, I think Ty asked that one, eh? Yeah, it's still about the 800-meter rezoning thing. Have you considered the public might not have approved this bus rapid transit routes if we had known about this 800-meter rezoning scheme? So yeah, that was the question.
Yeah. So had the public might have come out with when council was approving the BRT system and said we don't want it, that could have happened, but they are separate projects. The bus rapid transit system was approved long before this was happening. And if it wasn't for the bus rapid transit system, it would be some other related to transit initiative, or we might not get the funding at all. So it was one of the initiatives, like in the core application, in the original application, it really spoke to corridor planning and everything that we've been working on. It was close to transit, and the original application, it didn't require that we had these changes within 800 meters. And I mean, that came at the end of November, kind of as a shock to all of us, really, that our boundaries are going to be changing, and the requirement to allow 4 stories when that's not what we had said to the public, and that's not really what we had planned.
Right. Okay, and then there's one here on just affordability of housing. Is this all meant to increase housing affordability? And then there's a follow-up about clarifying the redefinition of corridor residential districts. For example, it says in the previous document, the maximum height was 10 meters. What would be the new maximum heights?
So, okay, so for the maximum height of corridor residential, this is something that has definitely not been decided yet, but we are looking at increasing it. Without increasing it, it really nullifies the whole zoning district, and it doesn't really make sense anymore. So increasing it to allow for 4 stories is the direction that we're headed. So however many meters that would equate to. And then your other question, sorry, you had tied it.
Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna, yeah, about affordability of.
Oh, yeah. So the
Yes,
Housing
sir.
Accelerator Fund in general is about affordability throughout the whole country, about the nation. I mean, housing is definitely becoming more and more unaffordable for everybody. And so this is their initiative, the federal government's initiative, to try and increase housing. And we definitely have a housing shortage within Saskatoon. Our population has grown immensely. We have a very low vacancy rate for rentals, and hopefully these initiatives, they can really help make a change in our city.
Okay, thanks, Pam. There's one question here. So if you can please elaborate on the Woodlawn route, the properties were station mixed use. Will those properties stay same, like station mixed use or corridor mixed use, or will they now be under the new 4-story residential building zoning? I can repeat it if you didn't catch the whole
Sorry.
question.
Yeah, I'm just bringing up the map.
Okay.
So this is the new Woodlawn land use map. Everything within the transit development area, though, allows for 4 stories, and that's throughout every area, Woodlawn, all of them. So the changes that you can see here is corridor residential was added in a lot of places that it hadn't been extended to previously, and then community facility was the other change. So like the corridor residential is just really aligning what the vision is for the future of the area, and allowing that 4 stories really says that corridor residential is throughout the corridor growth area. And then everything that you see that's in white, it's because it already has a higher land use, or it would have had corridor residential. Hope that answers that question.
Right. And then follow-up question, can you be more specific on CRES, C-R-E-S?
Oh, corridor residential zoning
Yeah.
district. Yeah, so the corridor residential zoning district, it will likely have to change. So there's, because we're allowing 4 stories, that zoning district does not at this moment. It was a lower height. So we're going to have to go and look at it, and we're going to look at both of them. And this might not be in the short term when we allow for the 4 stories right away. It might be that we leave the corridor zoning districts as is, and then we come back and we have to clean them up, because these changes that are happening, they're all very quick, and there's going to have to be a lot of re-examining what our zoning bylaw is, because it's essentially like we're redefining what low residential is in our city. it's having that much impact.
All right. And then one, again, back to rezoning and land use changes. It seems like the rezoning and land use changes on bus rapid transit, it says when will BRT be started? It seems like you want to build housing before developing transit, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely heard that throughout our engagement that I've heard like you should wait until your transit is fully in place before you build any of the, or not that we build, but we do any of these changes. But to be honest, it takes so long for these plans to happen, for development to occur, that would be like, oh, it like the development just couldn't catch up. So by, it's having the growth to occur near these transit routes, like they're already transit there, and it's supporting infill development and many of the principles that make good city planning in general. So as for when the bus rapid transit system will come online, it is dependent on the second round of funding being approved, which it is not at the moment. So they're just waiting on that.
I'll just
All right.
add that construction is planned to start on some stations in some portions of the bus rapid transit system for the areas that funding was approved for this year. So the city did receive funding approval for the Green Line, as well as a number of other initiatives tied to our bus rapid transit funding plan. The outstanding lines of bus rapid transit are the red and blue lines, which we're still awaiting funding approval for. So construction starts this year, with still pending response on the final funding.
Thanks for that, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, there's a few more here, Chris, Pam. Does the corridor planning team believe the 4-story multi-unit redevelopment is a good idea in its own right?
Like at first when I heard about it, I have to say I was very shocked and like, oh, we can't do this. But then as I went through the development standards and really looked at it and thought about it, I saw this as a really great opportunity for where development should occur or can occur, that it's enabling it. And it's, advancing our corridor growth area much quicker than we have in the past. And I see like this as being a really great opportunity to increase housing within this growth area. And we're getting backed by some significant funding. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add from the team, but I don't want to speak for everyone on this one. Oh, setting aside the monetary benefit.
Right. Okay, so next one here is, are you saying there's no consideration being given to areas of historic significance, e.g. Broadway?
So Broadway, I mean, there definitely is consideration being given, and Broadway is a corridor main street. It does not have a zoning district tied to it. Also, or it does have a zoning district, but not one that doesn't already allow 4 stories. That can currently happen today. You can build.
Yeah, I will just add to your response, Pam. The B5B zone, which applies to the Broadway district quite broadly already today, is not intended to be changed. And indeed, as Pam noted, the amendments that are required as part of our half commitments are not proposing any changes to the existing zoning district that applies to Broadway, nor are we proposing amending that zone in any way ourselves. So as Pam noted, it currently already supports development at a much greater density than the half requirements outline, but it also comes with some of development standards that are meant to ensure that development has a character that is in keeping with the Main Street of Broadway, with things like step backs and minimum site areas that scale with the height and so on. So the existing zoning stays in place, and it's already is a zone that is meant to consider the unique characteristics of Broadway.
Thanks, Chris. There's a question here on maps. Why do maps say 400 meters station buffer if the area is 800 meters?
Sure. So the maps that we're sharing today, those are the corridor growth area maps. They're the land use maps. They're not considering the transit development area. So that is generally 250 meters either way. So what we consider for the corridor growth area was 400 meter walkshed.
Mm.
And that's how we created the corridor growth area boundaries. That's what was considered. And also we shared these maps prior to knowing anything about the transit development area and those 800 meter boundaries.
Okay, I'm curious if the city of Saskatoon is looking at mechanisms to build vibrant neighborhoods, promoting local businesses, recreation, services, etc., in the higher density locations rezoning areas.
Sorry, I'm just trying to see this question myself.
Yeah.
So with the corridor station mixed use, it does allow for commercial at grade. In fact, it requires it. And I mean, that's promoting local businesses to occur through the corridor planning program. Through those corridor plans, we are looking at park space, open space, and how we can add recreational, how we can add recreation where needed, and streetscaping and all those other amenities. And so that those corridor plan areas, they really focus around where the bus rapid transit system is going. And you'll see like the highest improvements being where the transit stops are. So through corridor planning, I guess that would question.
And then more questions on the Housing Accelerator Fund. With the HAF changes needing to be tied into transit, but not necessarily BRT, what happens if we don't get the further BRT funding or if it's delayed?
It has no impact on the Housing Accelerator Fund.
And one here on zoning again. What is the plan for zoning of properties along Preston between the intersection of Main Street and 14th Street?
Okay, so the land use I can bring up.
I'll just, while you're doing that, Pam,
Sorry,
further elaborate on the question about the funding for BRT and the impacts to HAF. Couple things. The Housing Accelerator Fund, as you noted, is not necessarily tied to the BRT approval, but indeed they did evaluate our transit system as part of the application and determined that our high frequency transit met the criteria that they were looking for. And just to point to our southern neighbor, Regina, they had they don't have a BRT, and nor do they currently have plans for a BRT, though they have a mechanism that would trigger movement towards a BRT at a certain point. And they've actually in Regina already approved changes very similar in nature to these ones that we'll be bringing forward in June. So, and then lastly, what I will say is we're very confident that our application for funding for the red and green or red and blue lines of the bus rapid transit system will be fully funded. I would say that the delays there are administrative, but we're anticipating approval.
Okay, so the question we had was, what is the plan for zoning of properties along Preston between the intersection of Main Street, which is right here, to 14th Street? So none of these properties are station mixed use, so there is no rezoning application that we're going to proceed with for the opt-in. However, everyone within this area, within the transit development area, will be part of that, allowing 4 stories, multi-unit dwellings. So that is the plan for the rezoning, and the details of what that will look like, what the site width will be, the setback requirements, if there'll be step backs at a certain height, all of those details, they are being looked at, and we will release them as soon as we can. So I'll just read out this one comment here. Just feel a lot of change management work is going to be needed for all core urban dwellers and homeowners in Canada. This is a huge, huge change, and it seems like there's no plan to work with or support the folks who live in core neighborhoods who just got whacked by a take it or leave it deal from Ottawa. Just my 2 cents as you proceed. Just wow. It is a shocking change. I agree with you.
Yeah, and then we've got a follow-up question. Can we start sending approval requests for redevelopment, or do we have to wait for council to approve it?
Yes, you have to wait for council to approve. Development review won't be able to do anything until that approval.
Why do you think this rezoning will lead to affordable housing?
It will, by increasing the number of units within the city, it will increase, like, I don't know. It just depends on the builder, I suppose.
I'll just jump in, Pam, but I guess on a broad level, I think it's, to simplify, maybe just removing red tape to be able to develop affordable units or more multi-unit dwellings. So making the rules less strict for where they can be put would be kind of the most general way I would answer that.
Chris here. The Housing Accelerator Fund is intended to essentially unlock a lot of development potential in areas that are currently constrained with zoning requirements that essentially restrict development to single family or two unit dwellings only. So I think what if I can interpret their intended approach, it's really to, as Pam noted, to remove regulatory barriers to housing in areas where infrastructure and services already exist to support that housing. So our commitment under the HAF program is to basically enable and support, I believe it's 940 housing units over and above our expected number of housing units over the next 3 years. So that works out to roughly 300 and some odd units a year is the target. That'll be supported in a number of ways through these regulatory changes that we're speaking of in part today, as well as through some incentives that are intended to primarily focus on supporting affordable housing, but that may also support some market housing.
Patrick Lowe here. So I'm working on corridors as well as working on the back end of the incentives that will be offered through the Housing Accelerator Fund. So watch for that. Now that the announcement has been made, watch for some news about incentives, particularly affordable housing, to come out within the next couple months or before summer.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. So there's a question on what date in July will the council approve?
Don't have a calendar.
I just answered that question in text. It was
Oh, yeah.
so City Council meets the last Wednesday of each month, so that date will be July 31st.
Thank you, Chris. How is the city planning to work on the sewer line and water line capacity?
How are we planning on working on it? It's constant improvements. There is monitoring being done throughout the corridor growth area to support growth within the corridors as well as downtown. And that is a long-term plan that will happen over many years.
The city hasn't. Oh, sorry, Pam. I just wanted to jump in and to comment. The city does have a water and sewer master plan that does factor in growth along the corridors. And so we do have an existing we have existing information on where the constraints are and where the updates the enhancements may be needed. But as Pam noted, it's really an ongoing process, and some of those improvements will depend on where the development where development interest and uptake is highest. So we'll need to be monitoring development, monitoring the growth, and identifying the improvements as they're needed.
I see one comment here. I don't see much interest being taken into the huge amount of work undertaken previously on the corridor planning process. This is hugely discouraging. So we are continuing to do work on the college corridor plan. It has been paused a little bit while we work on the transit infrastructure. So we will continue doing that. And also our attention has been taken away with lots of the work that we've been doing to support this Housing Accelerator Fund initiative. But as we continue down this path, you will see a lot more work being done and some benefits within the college area. I'm not sure where this comment, if you'd like to elaborate on this comment, I can further comment.
I think we missed one here on parking requirements. Parking requirements also The earlier corridor zoning allowed for mixed use of certain lots. Will that continue, or will this new change override the earlier proposed change for bus rapid transit or bus rapid route?
So I'm not sure what the question is, but it does not override the previous corridor zoning districts. They are still mixed use zoning districts. So we're doing the opt-in for station mixed use. We are confident with that as is, how it's written, no changes. Was there another point to that, Thomas, that I missed?
I'm just gonna go back. Yeah, right there.
I
we
do.
will-
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Pam. So yeah, I'll just read that last part. Well, parking requirements. Also, the earlier corridor zoning allowed for mix. I'm just reading what
Yeah.
regarding.
I think it was the
Yeah.
parking requirement. So
Yeah.
the city administration is looking at removing parking requirements throughout the whole city. So that will be going to council sometime this year for approval. There will still be regulations in the zoning bylaw that will regulate the parking, but what it's saying is that it's not requiring a maximum amount of spaces. So often what it does is it makes development occur in a certain way just to accommodate the number of spaces that it's required. And in some instances, it might not be needed based on the type or style of development that's occurring. And so so it just opens it up. And the thought is that, when you're closer to transit, that you have other options rather than owning a car. So that is a huge conversation, and I'm sure we could have lots of debates back and forth about that. It seems to always be a hot topic. I do see one comment here being 41 million won't go far. Are we, the taxpayers, going to be hit with increased property taxes to cover the rest? Am I going to have to pay more taxes to live in a construction zone? So I don't know what you would be paying for out of your pocket or out of the taxpayer's pocket for this project. So the 40 million would cover administration costs. It covers incentives. The increase in infrastructure would need to occur whether we're building on greenfield or if we're doing it infill. Like we can often use the same infrastructure. Sometimes it has to be upgraded to accommodate an increase in development, but where it doesn't, it's actually seen as a reduction in taxes because we have a higher tax base and we don't have to service as much area of the city.
Thank you, Pam. Is there any analysis on the economic rate of return and social return on this investment?
Not that I'm aware of. Has anyone else looked into that?
I don't think this, that's Ty. I don't think the city has done its own independent analysis on that. I mean, in general, there's quite a bit of, I guess, academic research pointing towards the benefits of providing affordable housing, I guess, or I guess the broader impacts of implementing programs that increase affordable housing, but I don't believe the city has done its own internal analysis of our specific situation here. That's a tough question.
Yeah. Thank you, Ty. So question on trees. There are big trees in older neighborhoods and the constant issue of there's a constant issue of tree root blockage. Are we protecting trees or sacrificing old trees and upon development, planting new trees by owners or developers?
So part of the landscape requirements will be to add trees along the corridor growth area. In terms of developing within, and there's a tree, let's say, in the way, if it is a city-owned tree, then there is some sort of something that has to be, you can't just tear down a city tree for one. Yeah. And then there's a tree protection bylaw. So there's lots of things that look at protecting the trees within neighborhoods. And I believe that there's just a more recent policy that was approved.
Yeah, it's Ty again. You might be thinking of like the green infrastructure strategy, which, or no. To get to the root of the question, this won't trump our existing rules about protecting trees and increasing the canopy in the city. We don't want people to tear down all the trees, and we want more trees. Simple answer.
Yes, and Patrick Lowe here. Just to add to that, City Council did just pass at the end of January a new tree protection bylaw requiring if there's any construction near a tree that's located on a city boulevard, then the construction company or the property owner would have to apply for permits before starting that construction activity.
Okay, thanks, Patrick, for that. Are community benefit arrangements for developers being considered in the context of corridor planning as well as the downtown redevelopment discussions?
I can speak to this one, Pam.
Okay.
Sorry to jump in. This is
Mhm.
Chris Schultz. The City Council asked us to look into a community benefit agreement with the Downtown Event and Entertainment District. Administration has looked into this quite extensively, and we are looking at the potential and how a community benefit agreement might work in that scenario. They're certainly a very complex tool. There's plenty of value there, but they're also very, very complex. And I think we have certain levers available to us in the Downtown Event and Entertainment District, where we're the owner of essentially the planned facilities and currently many of the properties around the area, and so can tie community benefits to partnership agreements and participation in the area. Where we have private property developments, community benefits agreement it's a lot more murky in terms of how those would be implemented. Council's not yet asked us to look into that, and at this point, I think I would struggle to see how we could, at least in the time frames we've been given, implement a community benefit agreement.
Thank you, Chris, for that. So this is more of just a comment. The city must have some control over how these areas are developed. The comments, affordable housing and housing for seniors, must be taken into consideration. And yes, there was a question about will there be a percentage of this units designated to low-income housing for seniors?
Not that I'm aware of.
While some jurisdictions across Canada have tools that you might call inclusionary zoning, which actually require some portion of development to include affordable housing, our legislation in Saskatchewan at least to the extent that we've looked at it, it is actually quite a bit more limiting in terms of our ability to do that. It's not to say that it would be ruled out, requiring some component of market development to include affordable units, but it is more of a struggle. Our approach has traditionally been, and what I expect it will be with incentive programs tied to the HAF funding, is more on an incentive-focused approach where we would seek to incentivize and provide greater incentives for more affordable units than we would for through regulation, as we are limited in that aspect.
There's a comment here. Developers in other Canadian metropolitan areas have exploited this type of density increase without meaningfully adding to affordable units in those cities. And as density increases in core areas, folks who have built communities in what are currently considered undesirable neighborhoods start to get pushed out of the core and further away from services and the higher density areas that best support them. I want to see something here that gives different prospects for our city. It's a very good point. So it's speaking to like gentrification. And I guess how we'd like to address perhaps this is by incentivizing development that is closer to the core within the corridor growth area, incentivizing that affordable housing piece. But that's a very good comment. Thank you. Are there any new comments or questions?
Maybe Pam, there you can repeat if someone wants to reach out with a specific question, who might be the contact.
Sure, I'll put that up. Right. So here, right here is our email, and it emails our whole team. And then we've got this engage page with all of the material that we've shared today, and anything in the future that we will be doing as well, we will be sharing it, like any of the projects for June and July, those approval, we'll be sharing it on this page as well.
I don't, Patrick Lowe here. I don't see any more questions in the queue. So maybe we'll just give it like 20-ish seconds. And then if anyone has any further questions, we can answer them in more detail through the email that Pam has just shared.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening and asking all these tough questions. And thanks for your interest in the work that we do. And feel free to email me if you have any further questions.
And yes, to the person who just asked this question, yes, this meeting tonight has been recorded since 7 p.m. and we will be posting a video of this meeting on the engage saskatoon.ca/engage/corridor land use and rezoning, the URL that is currently shown on the screen.